Good evening, guys. Thank you for joining us for our very first podcast episode of the BIM community. We have our regional BIM Nuts panel together, and I'm going to run through some introductions quickly. If we can start, Isak, you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, which industry you service?
I'm in the facility management industry mainly. Yeah, I think that's good enough for the purpose of this discussion.
Great stuff. And then we have Louis Viljoen as well.
Hi there, I'm Louis Viljoen. I'm involved in structural engineering and the IT part of that.
Fantastic. Herman?
Hi, that's Herman. Hi, I'm a security specialist, but I've worked extensively and been very involved in integrating facility management into a totally integrated solution.
Fantastic. And Jacques?
Hi, my name is Jacques van der Westhuizen. I'm a senior draftsman. We mainly work on mining projects. But it's from stormwater management, geotech, all that kind of stuff. And what I do is I work on as a civil designer. It's mostly support and training, and then also trying out some new stuff and see how we can work together and faster, because we've got different departments. And it's all so I'm trying to glue them all together with all the stuff that I do.
Okay, fantastic. Yanni.
Hi, I'm Yanni Viljoen, not related to Louis Viljoen. I manage a professional services team, and we're mostly focused on software adoption and BIM implementation in our architecture and engineering space.
Great stuff. Thank you, Yanni. Leon?
Hi, I'm Leon van Rensburg. I also look after the software, the IT side of the AEC market and the BIM space.
Hey, Marlize?
Hi, I'm Marlize Jordan. I'm focused mainly on software solutions, making sure that clients have seamless interaction between various software packages that they use. Mainly focused within the structural and civil markets with BIM.
Fantastic, thank you. And Nicholas?
I'm in the multidiscipline services, so architecture, structure, mechanical, electrical, and weight services, and focus mainly on BIM deliverables and training, specifically on the Autodesk-related products, and Revit and such.
Fantastic, thank you. So guys, we sort of set up this first podcast to sit back, take a bit of a breather. Things have been hectic with COVID-19 and the lockdown, and it's wreaked absolute havoc to our industry. And I thought I'll open up with a question to you guys as pre-COVID or pre-lockdown, what would you see was hindering the implementation of BIM in our industry? Why are we struggling? Nick?
Okay, I've got a couple of, I think it's a couple of variable things, but a lot of the time, what I'm finding that's consistent across a lot of firms, there's a lot of discussion about BIM and deliverables, but it's seen that it generates a bit of extra work, can potentially open liabilities. So a lot of the more senior people in the design offices are happy to tender based on the ability to do BIM, but are very inclined to limit what they offer. And as such, it's never a priority to sit with the client and educate the client what the advantages are to them, so that and actually incorporate those advantages and the client's requirements into the original brief. So we find a multi-approach. I'll go in and we'll tender on big tenders, and we'll promise them BIM, and we'll show them what it can do, and then everybody gets excited, and we potentially win the tenders away from other people. But then when it actually comes to delivering, we deliver very well. I'm not saying all the time, but unless it's actually stipulated in the client's brief, or they have a digital understanding, or ERR, or whatever it is, the teams end up creating a generic execution plan and deliver 3D models with basic coordination, and that's where it stays. So the clients don't see anything advantageous out of it other than 3D models and a couple of new ways of working and sharing information. So I think it limits their they don't see direct benefits. So what happens is it's business as usual. They get the same traditional approach and drawings, just done in a digital environment, and no one's actually guiding the client and enforcing that the teams deliver to a higher potential other than 3D models and basic coordination. And I would say that's probably one that stands out across most industries and even the big players. And then there's a whole lot of others.
Okay, good. Leon, your opinion?
Yeah, I tend to agree with what Nick said around the clarifications weren't very well adopted, but I also think people didn't really investigate the real value that they could see just by streamlining some of their processes and some of their workflows and adopting of the technology. And I'm very careful using the phrase adopting of technology because people think we refer to software or hardware, but even updated workflows or updated documentation or a new way of contracting or a new way of working together, all of those things play a role in technology in some form, shape, or size. And I think people have been very reluctant because there was no pandemic. There was no main big reason for them. People got hurt on construction sites, and not physically, but in my reference, but they got hurt because they had some financial loss or they had some losses to the project. We've known about the construction organizations in South Africa that's closed down over the last 5 to 6 years. And I believe that a lot of this was resistance to adopting or embracing a new way of doing things. And I think that's why we haven't really seen a big uptake prior to the pandemic or the circumstances that we find ourselves in right now.
Okay, Nick, you mentioned potentially open up some liabilities. You care to extrapolate a little bit more on that?
You know what happens? As soon as a design firm has to offer a little bit more and is held liable for a little bit more, creating a model and saying to the guys, doesn't matter, the PDF supersedes the model. And okay, the QS's thing, we'll give you basic QS information, but you know, we're not liable for it, that you're still 100% responsible. Then what starts happening is the model becomes generic and it doesn't really matter how you give it. It becomes IFC. If things are missing, it doesn't matter. It's good enough to create the PDFs because the PDF or the DWG is what gets used by the contractors. So then there's shortcuts and no focus, not as much focus on the quality of the model and the data associated to, because you know at the end of the day, it's being used as a virtual coordination tool, but no, the data you associate to it, no one's checking it, no one's using it, it's not a requirement. So when I hand over to a client, there isn't a check on the asset information model or registry. There's not a, you know, at stage X, Y, 3, 4, 5, 6, no one's checked that the appropriate data that was agreed to, if it was ever even written down or agreed to, is there and available for the maintenance facilities, for the contractor, for procurement. So what happens is you end up with pretty models. And I've found a resistance even, you know, with a lot of firms, and it's not the technicians or anybody there, it's the senior directors. So they will go in and they go, shit, it's fine, let's have a discussion. Look, I'll play open cards. I've been in a few meetings, and the one would be, guys, we need to create an ERR for the client. There's a BIM execution plan. We're going to do an assessment on the digital deliverables, the asset information for the different teams. We're going to take all this information. We're going to make sure at the different stages, you know, the various data is available and the exported data is usable in a database as agreed. And you know what? If it's not monitored or policed, it's extra work and it's potentially liable. And the directors themselves a lot of the time go, no, just give them this, send in the PDF, forget about that, because at the end of the day, and I was at a meeting today where it actually was mentioned, at the end of the day, they're going, well, we never actually signed agreement on that ERR or on that execution plan, or that we were going to put this information. So right now we're behind, we're at stage 4. And you know what, the client didn't really say he wanted it. Otherwise, they should have given us that document way back before we started stage 3 or at the beginning of the project. So shut up about it, and let's just make sure we're coordinating and doing the model. So there's a big resistance to, because potentially of the level that people are at, they're scared to do that extra step. They're scared to add that extra time. But then on top of it, the person that normally polices it is either the project manager who doesn't know anything about it. And sometimes you have Mace and those guys, and they've got a checklist that they'll go through. But otherwise, it's the architect themselves. And a lot of the time, the architect doesn't want to be responsible for all that extra stuff, because it's never been signed in as a requirement as such. It's been a nice to have. It's been a BIM can do this for you. And if the client is not a little bit more mature and understanding of what they get out of it, or have done it before, to actually demand it and have it as part of a contractual stage 4, we need this by this stage, and you haven't given it, there's, it's the same as you being behind in your documentation or your drawings or your design. There's very little, there's very few firms that put up their hands and offer to do it and catch up, because what happens is it just becomes a fight and a conversation and extra work. So yeah, it's yeah, and look, it is slightly different from different perspectives. Sometimes it's firms that don't know how to do it. Sometimes it's firms who users are behind or the work's behind. Other times they're just scared. Other times it's just a lot of extra work. And again, if it's not in any way put down contractually, but most people will do what they can do or what their level is in their firm, and that's what they'll deliver. And at minimum, right now, and I'd say the majority of the projects, it's coordination, management, documentation, and a model that fulfills a certain level of development or whatever it is that you agree to. But it's not. It's like a a handshake, a friendly agreement of what we would like to do. It's in no ways measured or enforced by anyone, and so there's never external consultants or someone that is on the client side in essence, or the contractor side, depending on what kind of a project it is. If it's a large commercial or industrial, that sits back and goes, the architect, the engineer at this stage, this piece of information is missing. You haven't fulfilled these requirements. Your database isn't up to date. And then sit with the client and go, right, your contractor, sit with the contractor and say, Mr. Contractor, I know you're doing procurement. Here are the schedules. Do they line up with what you're doing? Do they line up with the drawings you've got? So there's no one holding the hands, and almost like managing the digital process. I know there are roles that are allowed for, but these roles are put on BIM execution plans, but they're not actually doing anything more than the basic model executions coordination and sitting in a coordination meeting and discussing what's missing. No one's sitting with the contractor early on and saying, Mr. Contractor, you're busy ordering your G5 soil or your concrete ready mix for this stage. Here's the quantities we were looking at. These are the documentation. This is, have you checked it? Does it align? And it doesn't happen. So straight away there's a disconnect right at construction phase. So when that happens as a disconnect, by the time the construction phase carries on, and it typically carries on traditionally, there might be an agreement that there'll be an as-built at the end, and then everybody scrambles to do a little bit of modeling and changing of models to hand that over to the client in whatever format. But the client very, very seldomly, unless, and I find it's the international clients, if I deal with the WeWorks and the TLCs and, all these big guys, they've done multiple projects and they're used to getting certain information, and they've got processes in their office that leverage that information to do other things. And they will stand on your head if you don't give it to you, and they'll turn around and you won't get your payment at that stage, the full payment, if parts of it are missing. We've never ever done that with, I could say, the less experienced or the less informed client or property owner, developer. That has implications.
So just to summarize, is that well, it's almost seen as a nice to have, sometimes my client, and the current contractual agreements that get signed on projects does not make provision for that as a hard and fast and deliverable. Isak, on your side as an FM team who needs to work with the data that gets presented at handover, how's this affecting you guys, that this disconnect between the design office and construction and then final handover?
No, Jay, it makes for a big issue. I mean, I'm working on projects where we were trying to get the square meterage of the buildings that the guys were cleaning, and in the end, I had to sit down with the client and get the information from him. I had to upload the drawings and get an architect to do the calculations for me. So no, it's a massive issue, and yeah, I think there's the main issue is, and I think Leon has actually touched on it, there's no pandemic to force us to work together and to force us to get the benefits of BIM. People are used to the way they're working, they pay the money for it. There's no reason to force this thing and make sure that we get the benefits from BIM.
Great. So the one aspect that we also touched upon is the fact that some of the major construction firms, Leon, you mentioned that went under, and that was even in a time pre-COVID. We already had this. We already had a construction pandemic that hit us. Looking into that, Louis, do you have an opinion on why that's happened? Okay, we'll ask Leon. You want to jump in on that one?
Hi, Jay. Having a look at the industry prior and some of the way people were working, it almost seemed like we didn't really care about wastage. Wastage in time, in the number of laborers, in all aspects of a project, and I feel, if I can shift forward very quickly to the environment we find ourselves in right now, I feel that now everybody is looking at their purses and everybody is looking at tightening belts, not just personally, but in their organizations as well. And going back to prior to this pandemic, it is almost as careless. Well, we've done that this way for 100 years. The client didn't specify it. Clients don't know, so we'll just run with it. And we will give you what you think you need. I used to manage a few hotels, and one of the biggest problems I had was a new construction and some fancy lighting system that they put in. I'm pretty sure 100 years ago, flicking a switch was fancy lighting systems as well. But this one worked with a program, with a computer program, and it was run from a server room, and I got a nice little handover and I got papers, and everybody buggered off site, and I did my dry run and I couldn't switch the lights on in my building. I had no clue. I went to try and look for the manuals. I tried to find the information. Eventually I had to phone the electrical engineer. Mm-hmm. And I think we are so zoned, and Nick touched on it, where he said, contractually, well, we weren't responsible for that. So we gave you everything and you need to be able to run this. But I think there's this miscommunication between industries. From a owner-operator perspective, we want a house, we want a commercial building, we want it with specific things. We may worry about certain maintenance components. It being translated over to the architects and the QSs to say, right, well, this is what they want. And in their language, they now take that concept and they create something from that, that they then pass along the rest of the professional team, many of whom are on this call. And the professional team have their own language, and then it moves into construction. Well, that's got a unique language, and I think that played a big role in all of this. So not just the expenditure that went on from time. How often do projects run over time and over budget? That carelessness, or it's okay, it's 50,000 here, or it's 100,000 there, or and all stacks up at the end. And also the carelessness of information flowing all the way through to the owners to something that they can utilize. They don't use a CAD, computer-aided design software, to work on, they use a financial package to run their businesses on, or they use a specific software that they have to manage their facilities on. And I think those are disjuncts, and those are part of the reasons why industries would fail, and also why there hasn't really been a connection in this industry and in this joint effort around creating an awareness for BIM and an adoption on that.
With the owner, the owner of the project holding the purse strings, etc., do you guys feel that they had to step up and take more responsibility as an owner of a project for the actual outcome of the project? And less blame on the contractors involved in the project, but the owners taking more responsibility and being more involved in the process from design to construction. Do you guys think that might make a difference?
Just if I can add there, I've had a couple of discussions with various owners at different levels, and I found something that was interesting. Owners that are aware of what they should be getting out of it, and they've had people in their organizations, or they're part of an international organization that has been walked through and done projects like this, and now they learn what to expect, is separate. The majority of the other owners look at it that the QS and the project manager are there representing them and their project.
Mm-hmm.
And they rely on the QS and the project manager to manage that of a lot of things. When you speak to the project managers, they're probably the least, and I'm generalizing, but generalizing by saying there's maybe a few exceptions, but normally they're the least capable of managing the digital or BIM deliverable and the different stages and understand it thoroughly, other than, and that is part of the problem. So the client puts his trust in a project manager whose role is to do something totally different than manage that side and the data and how it's handled. And I've given the one client an analogy where you say, listen, if you're doing something legally, you'll go to an appropriate attorney. If it's with the buildings and selling, you'll go to conveyance attorney. If it's got to do with the company and that, you'll go to a corporate attorney. Or when you go to a doctor, you'll go to a particular specialist. If it's your eyes, it's ophthalmologist, etc., etc. Now, what's happening is you're going to a GP that know that you're going for a checkup, or who's going to just do a general check over and physical, which may be your project manager, but you're not going to anybody that's representing you, that's a specialist in this aspect of the project, which can actually save not just your contractor money and make it viable for them, but you can now leverage that information and use this as a additional selling point when you sell the building, as a management point while you're managing or maintaining the building, etc., etc. And the problem that goes, oh yeah, okay, I'll speak to the architect and they'll do it. But then straight away you've got another conflict of interest. So when you go to the architects or to the project managers, and I'm saying, Stefan, Turner Townsend, Mace, all the big guys, and we've had a couple of conversations. The attitude is, no, we're not opening ourselves up to this, but give me a checklist of what I need to check at each stage, and I'll check that it's done. And you're going, but you're not proactively checking, you're not proactively filling in what's missing, you're not proactively educating the client or going back to the client, doing an assessment so that you can make sure that information in, because once that flow of information in the project starts and is in construction stage, no one's going to go back and do that. They're too busy fighting about the 1 week missing here and the claims on delays from this drawing. And, and the problem is if you offer to do that role, and I've done that role of only 2 projects, nobody wants to pay for it as such. So no one's prepared to say, okay, there's a 12% allowance for all the design team and the QS and everybody else. 1% will go to X, so there'll be 11%, because nobody wants to sacrifice that, and no individual discipline will pay for it. But they'll all pay a fortune to have consultants come in or people to help them fix their systems, or they. So you almost need to understand in some buildings where the deliverable is a BIM-related deliverable that the client's actually tied in, that there is going to be repercussions or payments withheld if things aren't met. And therefore, suddenly a role that comes in almost as a digital project manager or BIM or whatever it is, that actually can discuss with the client and then openly discuss with the team or with the project manager or with the contractor without worrying about additional fees and what role and who they're responsible to. They're responsible for the project and to the client, and have those discussions. So, you know, you're almost expecting a new role to emerge when the contracts and the liabilities are actually enforced. But until such time, you know, part of those roles, I believe, get flogged off to the architect or the project manager or the, you know, whoever it is that kind of knows a little bit more about the subject.
And it sounds like there is big fragmentation in the project environment. A lot of our talk has been about the process from design to construction, but there's not been a lot about, you know, who looks after the client's interest in terms of maintaining that infrastructure going forward.
Very much so, very much so.
And that seems to be a missing element, is the fact that that's one key stakeholder that's not involved in the project environment. And from what I understand, it's like a lot of the handover stuff that gets done doesn't really service the needs of the facilities management or the maintenance team to take those projects forward. Am I correct, Isak?
No, Jay, it just doesn't happen. So, I mean, I've never been involved in any facility management contract where there's a, you know, a pack of documents around maintenance regimes. There's let alone the make, model, and serial number. You never ever get those things. I mean, you've got to go and find them yourselves. So, but I think Nick is touching on this thing. This is all about structure drives behavior. So if you can make sure that the contractual side of things is in such a way that the structure enforces and the optimization that you can get from BIM, I believe that's one of the first steps in taking this thing forward.
Yes, Jacques, on your side, what are your opinions on what we've discussed?
Okay, so I've actually worked for a few companies. So one was very much into BIM, and the other one is not was or is not that into BIM yet. Where I'm trying to convince them to optimize various stuff. Just one thing that I want to say from the start is, it's not that everybody was pre-COVID. Is what not everybody was buying into BIM. So some people would say, yes, BIM, let's do this, but they've got no understanding of what it was or is, and then it's like a management who say that, yes, but as I said, but they don't know what is involved. And they said, yes, we must do BIM. And then it stops there, because the guys who's been, as Nick said, that we've been doing this stuff like this for so long and we just want to get our money out, then we continue doing it. So I think in my instance, I actually need to do upward management to tell the guys, okay, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to do it. We need to plan for it. So there is a little bit more management what is involved there. And then another thing what I found is that uniformity in the company. With like our company where I'm working for now, I've got different structures, different departments, and not everybody's working in the same way, not using the same software. So that creates some issues, you know, if you want to work together. But obviously there is solutions, but not everybody wants to go and look for those solutions. So I'm trying to get that. I'm in there and stuff like that. How can I say, what was the next one? Oh, sorry, I just want to actually use a phrase, it might be a cliche. If we work together, we are stronger. So that was just from Cyril's work. But I think that is what we need to, especially in a lot of companies, what we need to try and do is we need to emphasize to the guys that we need to work together to actually be better and faster. I had an instance where we draw a structure and then we would send it to our structure guys and they would explode our drawings, what we've done in Revit, and then they would just manually label them and dimension them. And I said, okay, why are you doing this? I'm giving you a nice live model and it's being exploded. So I think the misconception was that, yes, we would, like I said, they used to do it in the same sense. I think also pre-COVID, and that's, well, not just for now, it's just maybe technology at the, let's say 5 years or 3 years back or so, we didn't have that much Wi-Fi. Our Wi-Fi speed wasn't that, our internet speed wasn't that fast. So I think that with going a little bit forward now, is that our internet has improved that, and I think that's why we can now, it is now a little bit more feasible to actually do and work from home and collaborate a little bit better. What I've also found is that the investment in setting up your projects and your BIM or your processes, I think that management is a little bit, I won't say afraid, but it's always, obviously you need to give some training. There's some roadblocks what you would need to get over, and I think the management is a little bit, in my sense, what I've experienced is a little bit afraid. Some people go forward, like my previous company, we went flat out for it. There was no discussion about it. We took that bull full on. But I think adapting to it, because as I said, with your older generation, some people is not that keen for the stuff. But one thing what is coming through all of this is communication. We need to speak to either way, up or down management, and we need to communicate to our clients as well and explain to them what the voordelen, what is it? Advantages is of actually using them. Like for us, I usually work with mining clients. It's usually in environmentalists. So they're not technical advanced in this, in the software and stuff what we do. So, and they also use different software, like I'm going to say MicroStation and then QGIS and stuff like that.
So, can I ask you a quick question? Sorry. When you speak about the conversation to those clients, do you find often the guys having the conversation with those that can make decisions, with the very senior people, is normally your company's very senior people? And those very senior people, so my director would always sit with the directors of Exaro, for example. And the problem is my director's capability and digital knowledge was abysmal, disgusting. So he would say, oh yeah, we can do that. And that was left. He would never sit with them and have a conversation. He would see BIM and the deliverables and the processes as a technical thing. And it just doesn't matter, when we get to that, we'll call Nick or John or Jay or whoever it is. So, you know, that's often I find where the disconnect happens, to even get those conversations and say, okay, you know, you speak to the client and in a meeting, you say, at this stage, you should be able to open this and do this. Let's discuss it and let me organize something. Your main directors that are in that meeting, because I'm not in that meeting, a lot of the technical and even the senior engineers aren't in that meeting, don't get the opportunity to even highlight that or say we need this bit of information and we can suddenly open these 6 doors. So I've sometimes found the conversation lower down happens and everybody's eager, but it never gets fed from the top down, because, you know, you might be invited to one presentation or one meeting, but then 4 of the others where these deliverables are happening, where these contracts are being signed or set up, you're not involved in them at all. So you can't say, no, you can't do that. You've got to do this. No, it's okay. We've signed the contract already and we're going ahead. You know, are you finding that happens a lot?
Yes, no, definitely. That's why I said that I think we also need to explain to our clients what is that benefit, because obviously, if you start off like a project and you start with a BIM implementation, and there is some money involved in it, and I think that is where a lot of people try to refrain from it. But that benefit of that input, that money what they invest then, will be much. Well, we all know that it's like your curves, like your BIM curves and stuff like that. If you can change something in your design and you've done all of your analysis, it's much cheaper to change it now when during construction. Well, from my side, I actually need to do upward management and explain to the management of what is actually this benefit of actually working this way, because I do not think that everybody understands it. And yes, BIM is a big keyword for us, because we've heard it for the last 10 years. Management is just hearing of it. Yeah, this new BIM thing, what we need to do, but they've got no understanding of it. So in my instance, that I need to do upward management, that is one thing what I've found. What is pre-COVID was one of the issues there.
Yes.
Just to add to Nick as well, I think when construction firms wasn't adapting to new technology, I've worked also with a few companies, consulting, and then with construction companies who have actually adapted technology and with LiDAR, all that kind of advanced software, and like your Field 360, BIM Field 360. And the guys who have actually adapted that, it's almost easier to actually work with them. You actually prefer to actually work with those specific contractors. And yes, obviously, then you can identify stuff, and we know everything what is going with that. So obviously there is some issues there, but I think the companies who didn't adapt it, it's just one of those things. It's one of those things of our time, as we need to use technology for what we've got there.
Yes. Yanni, your opinion? Sorry, I saw you raised your hand.
Yes, sorry. I actually just also wanted to touch on what Jacques mentioned and what Leon spoke about earlier about the state of the construction industry pre-COVID-19. I think if we look at different industries and the way that they've changed and evolved over the last couple of years, the way that we consume media and entertainment has changed, the way that we shop have changed, the way that we do our banking has changed quite a lot and has almost to a certain degree gone completely digital. And I mean, anyone in the construction industry can jump in and challenge me on this, but I don't think the construction industry has adapted the way that they work as much as other industries over the last 30, 20, 10 years. And that might be a reason why the construction industry wasn't doing as well as other industries in South Africa, pre-COVID-19. And then just also another thing, because I've heard this coming from Nick, and then I also think Jacques had mentioned this. I think oftentimes, at least in my experience, we find that it could be project managers or owners from a BIM point of view don't necessarily know what good looks like. So if you hand them, if you do handover or if you give them certain BIM information, they don't really have a good frame of reference to compare that with. So, we might start out by promising a whole lot of things in our BIM deliverable and come to the end, the client sits with information. They go, well, is this what good looks like? What's the real possibilities here? And I think what Jacques had also mentioned before, the same thing might be in certain organizations at top management, where they've heard about BIM and some of the BIM benefits, but they don't really know the ins and the outs of what good or best practice is.
Actually,
We fully agree with it. Yes.
Jay, sorry, I actually want to add on to what Yanni said. Having been on the other side of the fence, I think Yanni is hitting the nail on the head. The technology drivers shouldn't just be physical technology, but it should also be a common understanding. And I think that is also what's been lacking, is we're so concerned about our environment and the areas that we're working in. We all talk about BIM. Isak, Jacques, before joining the BIM community, how much did you guys know about BIM and the input of it and the actual impact? And when we speak to other FM organizations and owner operators, these guys don't understand BIM. We've coined it as BIM, and nobody has really translated that to the owner operators to say, instead of calling it BIM, instead of calling it intelligence, instead of calling it information or an EIR or all of these types of things, why don't we call it effective budgeting or your return on your investment, your recuperating your capital expenditure? How can you update your liquidity ratios? Those are things that the owner operators are worried about, because that's their financial guys talking to them. They're putting the money forth and they need to report back on that money. And I think that could be a massive disjunct between the AEC market and the owner operator market. Just add on to Yanni.
Fantastic. So just a question for the panel. We find a lot of property developers slash project owners have, the business people at the helm, the MBAs, the accountants, et cetera, and very few design professionals who actually can have this conversation. Is that something that is prevalent in the industry? Nick, you mentioned about the directors talking to each other that are not involved in the actual process. And do you think that if we had to have a design professional from an owner's perspective being in charge of projects, that we would have a better result?
You will, yeah, I believe you would. There are other ways, but that definitely works. I know a lot of companies that are successful in doing this. They've got a representative that understands the process, that actually represents them in a lot of these meetings, and is part of the technical meetings, or at least the key technical meetings and deliverable meetings. Their representatives are there. And I mean people like from BMW, Mercedes, WeWorks, a lot of big departmental stores internationally, etc., etc. So they've got ex-architects that know BIM well, that understand the digital process, that actually, or some of them actually, I know 2 firms that actually work in conjunction with a firm that supply them the people that represent them, almost like another discipline. And then what they have is they've got them on call and they're saying, right, we're doing this project. Could you allocate someone for this project? And that's going to represent me in the appropriate meetings, because I don't know what they want. But then the nice thing with that is it goes a little bit further. Those people can actually go to the client and help them set up the brief. We have had 1 or 2 projects where these guys are brought in almost like mediators at stage 3 in that, some bigger projects. And that's a little bit late, because what they do is they come in and they go, but this document's missing, this agreement wasn't done, stage 2 documentation wasn't done. So they almost give a report and leave again. But on a few projects where we've had a representative that understood it, it's been exceptionally more fruitful, because the whole team has to then suddenly perform. And it's also been more fruitful in that the client comes across as understanding the process just as well as a lot of the players, and people are less likely trying to, what's the term, bullshit the client, you know, because their representative knows what he's talking about. And it's often what you find, even if he doesn't know, or even if the client doesn't know, they go back to their client and they go to the clients and they say, listen, we can pull the data out of your PRRs in the room, and we can use it as access control and to pull out dashboards of where people like to work, what spaces are being used, etc. And the client then behind the scene implements this. And then when you start doing the second building with the client, they say, right, your PRRs must be integrated to the security system. Why? So that they can pull out logs and records. So you find where that does happen, and they go back to the clients and say, oh, let me show you what the team can do. Why don't we insist on this? Because you've got, you know, almost like a translator, a technical translator of what can be done and what will benefit the client. And it helps when they know the client, because each client's got different requirements and looks at different things. But yes, so in those cases, I think that works even better than, you know, someone else in the team doing it, because the person representing them has a better or more thorough understanding of how the client manages or procures or maintains a building. And we had that one dinner in Hatfield the one night, and there was the FM guy from Growth Point, and he was saying, well, you know, we looked at the one building and it didn't perform well, so, you know, the performance. And I said, but who did the performance measurements? And they go, well, I did with the maintenance team. I said, so how could you do the performance maintenance on the building? You weren't part of the brief. So the engineers, the architects, the mechanical, electrical, all the guys would never meet your brief, or would never perform based on what you want, because what you want was never put in as a part of the design requirements. They go and they went and put big window sills and windows wider than this because that's a problem down at the coast. And you're going, that was never part of the brief. That's one of your measurements or one of your key, you know. And they never gave us the warranty periods and the inspection dates. And I said, well, did you ever ask for it? No, but the architects and everybody should know about that. Why? Are they psychic? And then it struck me that the people doing the development of a lot of projects and driving the contract and the briefs are internally not in touch with their own maintenance and facilities. They see maintenance and facilities something that happens after they move into the building.
Yes,
and not as valuable a source of information to help define what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what light fixtures or toilets are abysmally performance over the 30 buildings or 10 buildings they own. And so they have their own communication, and there's no one there to say, here's the disconnect. Let me grab you and let's sit down. So before you do, you know, and that's often what's missing on the client side.
So it is extremely fragmented, and the fact that 80% of the cost of a project is usually maintaining that project afterwards
Very
is
much.
often missed.
And
So
that's also how that's also how they measure the success of the building.
right. So
What's it-
currently we found ourselves in a perfect storm. We've had a downturn in the construction of the property market heading into lockdown and into COVID-19. And as we entered COVID-19, we went into lockdown, and our economy came to a standstill. We were also hit with the downgrade from the various rating agencies. How does this road look forward? Marlies, do you have an opinion on that?
If I can take a stab at it, Jay.
Yeah.
And I think Herman will come in here. I believe that the only way we can really get the economy going and ensure that we do something about the lack of jobs is to invest in infrastructure as quickly as possible. And if we can ensure that, and it's happening, which I think it's the only way forward, that is certainly a way to do this properly and make sure that we get the benefits.
Louis, your side?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've read consistently is when something like this COVID-19 pandemic happens, it kind of wakes a lot of people up. So you tend to have a lot of drivers for new technology, etc. The other thing is, I think a lot of people have become complacent, and I'm not talking only about business owners and people who are running this. I think it's people who are active in the market, whether they are just laying bricks or whether they are an artisan, etc. I think people will get back into their jobs with renewed vigor, and if you have that, then it actually makes it easier for the leader or whoever's managing that process, if they want to put new systems and stuff in place. It will make it easier, because the worst thing you can do if you're trying to drive change is to have a lot of people laying around in the room not really listening to what you have to say. So I think COVID-19 has been a bit of a wake-up call for us, and I think South Africa really needs it. I just hope that we can get back to work fast enough. So there's, as we heard last night, there is this whole balance between losing lives and losing the economy that they have to manage. But I hope we can get back soon.
Sorry, can I just come in there as an extension to what Isak said? You okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to speak from the government's point of view. There's no doubt in their mind that the next big drive post-COVID is infrastructure build. And they're going to want to do massive projects, and they want to do them fast, and they want to do them successfully, because when you've borrowed more than 500 billion rand and you've borrowed a similar amount in 3 or 4 different ways, somebody's going to have to pay for that, and they basically got to get this country back to work. And that means headcount more than anything else as well. So there's going to be a massive gap between those that can and those that have to be accommodated and need a lot of training. So there's no doubt in my mind that COVID is going to be a wonderful thing that's happened to the infrastructure build environment. It's going to offer many, many opportunities. But we've got to, if I can be just so bold as to say, you've got to stop this techno talk. It doesn't help a bit. Somebody mentioned there that the financial director or the directors sit and talk. And that is absolutely correct. That's the South African way. It's pretty much the same way right throughout the world. If you don't talk like an FD, like a financial director, if you don't come with that kind of narrative that they understand, that your directors understand and can speak in the same narrative, this is not going to fly. You've got to show demonstrable benefits in short, sharp ways, and then you've got to celebrate those small victories and let those victories multiply for you. I mean, from a security point of view, BIM is the ultimate solution, because security, whether you like it or not, is asset management or asset protection or whatever phraseology you would like to use. but I use it extensively to prove fraud, to prove misappropriation, etc., etc. So there are many ways that you can begin to shine a very good light upon the philosophies and the policies around which BIM has been put together. So I hope I'm giving everybody a lot of good news and a lot of well-meant and well-directed hope.
And that's certainly a fantastic viewpoint to take out. Is the people who pay the bills don't speak bold and they don't speak technology. Very, very definite and very pertinent point there. Leon, you were raising your hand. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, Jay. You know, I think we need to be very careful here. There are some people that is very optimistic people. They are the entrepreneurs, they're the drivers of a new generation, a new way of working. But what we also find is there could be massive complacency. You know, we have this talk and we say that COVID is the right driver and the environment that we face ourselves in is the key to turning this vehicle around or to help turning this Titanic. But the concern that we could be facing is also a lot of complacency. There may be some hyped up energy because we finally can get back to work and we're not shackled down in this lockdown that we face. So there's a lot of excitement in the air and then it starts dissipating because we all form back into our normal habits. And I think it's up to government, as Herman was saying, you know, they mentioned massive infrastructure spend, but they have to lay an emphasis that it cannot be done on the principle or the same way that it has been done before. It needs to be done differently, faster, more accurately, to better quality. And I think when we all go back into industry, it is to constantly ensure that the people are remembering that we have to work in a new way. Because if this does come around again, and we face similar situations or perhaps different situations that cause a similar feeling, maybe then the impact we see won't be as dire, won't be as distraught as most people are facing right now. And I think that is something we need to be very cognizant of, is just balancing it out. But the people that are excited about this, that do see this as a turning point, we need to be those drivers. We need to be the reminders to everybody else up in the industry that change needs to happen.
Yeah, Leon, just to get in there.
Government.
Sorry, Herman, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that, Isaac. Look, certainly from a government point of view, there's no doubt in the right minds that are going to drive this infrastructure build that it can't be business as usual. It's got to be radically different, because there can't be any mistakes, because there just isn't enough money to make mistakes or for things to be misappropriated or captured, or whatever phraseology you'd like to use. So a lot depends upon us that are committed and that really understand and appreciate the efficiencies and effectiveness that can be driven through this process, to champion it, but not in the techno-speak way. You've got to adapt your narrative to the understanding and the capacity of understanding of those that have been put in charge of these things. And we've got to find a new way and tailor ourselves and adapt ourselves to that. And I think therein lies a challenge to us, but likewise, the benefit that can be derived from this is massive. And so I can only say to you that there is a serious determination in those that are going to be driving this infrastructure build.
Most definitely. Just, you know, as we head towards closing this up, Jacques, I believe you wanted to say something?
Yes. At my company, we were actually a small team running the pumps and pipeline division, and every year actually I set myself a goal for what I want to achieve. Last year I was actually getting Civil 3D standards out to everybody using the same template. this year I thought long about it, and I thought, because this, as I said, we work in a different company with different departments, and we use different software, and I thought, let our small team be the example of what we can do with BIM and how we can improve it and stuff like that. We actually set ourselves a goal end of last year. We want to go paperless in our small division. And by the time COVID hit us, we said, well, we're fine. We can actually now tell the rest of our company how we actually have done it, and that benefit of it. And I will also, I'm just referring to words or stuff what I've said, is like, there's a saying we say, if you can't change who will be, what, no, I didn't get my words right. But it comes to a point, if you can't change the world, but be the change. What is, I can't find the right words now, but it's actually coming down. But you have to be that example, and if you change yourself, and we must the way how we show BIM to the people, and that will actually influence them. So, but yes, these guys are actually working nicely, they're working better, faster, productive, and I think that is for, I'm sorry, I'm talking about all of us, because we are all passionate about this, is that we must be the example of how to change this stuff. We're a small community, but I think we all make a small difference in our companies, and I think we must continue doing it, but just more vigorously, because there is opportunity, as Louis said, that there's now an opportunity for us to change, or we should change, and I think the change is we are that conductor to actually ignite it and say, well, this is the way how we can do it. And I think there's some new policies or workflows what we can maybe implement now, or carry through to our companies, and yeah, I think this is, so I'm actually quite excited about it. But it's and I think as Louis also said, we must remember what causes this and how we improve it, because yes, as you said, we will all be very happy to go to work, and when everything is cool, and when after a while it will flatten out, but we must keep continuing remembering what we want to achieve and set that goal for us. And then I think and as I don't know what was your name, you must also celebrate small victories. That was a very, very powerful saying for me, and I think that is one thing that we must try to take forward as well. It's celebrate small victories. That's a nice thing for me. Anyway.
Exactly what Herman said, and it's also what Yanni said about, what does good look like, and being the bastions of what good looks like. Any last comments from you, Yanni?
I actually think the words that Jacques were looking for is be the change you want to see in the world.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sure plenty of you might have seen this post doing the rounds on LinkedIn, where it's who drove digital transformation in your company, yes. And then it had examples where it would be like, chief technology officer, someone else, or COVID-19. And I think COVID-19 has, vast amounts of downsides and a terrible impact on the economy. But what it has done is it has, in some cases, forced people to become more innovative and to look at other ways of collaborating and working together, and ultimately, made more people realize some of the benefits of building information modeling or management in that case. And going forward, I think what Leon had also said, we do run the risk, once everything returns to the new normal, that people will continue with traditional types of practices. But I think while we're still in this lockdown, we need to look at our own businesses and also, the people within our community and our clients, and really help each other and work together to, build the business of the future. Because once we come out of this lockdown, I personally don't believe that we will go back to normal. We will be in a new normal, and that new normal will see companies that's built for the future, companies that have digitized processes will strive.
Great. And Louis, your side?
I think the one, I like to see the positive. As I said, COVID-19 has given a very good opportunity. There's always the part that you have to be careful of. And I think we've all been looking for that lobbying government to get them in there. and we're really pushing BIM, raising the tide. Once all of this calms down, and as we've heard, infrastructure will be the one thing that government has to get into and get this going. There will be a lot of pressure on them to show easy wins and to show things happening quickly. And as Nico has said, that if the client doesn't even know how to let us know what they want and they measure stuff afterwards, it doesn't work. If this is going to be in the public eye, there will probably be some outcry. Someone's going to whisper in some minister's ear, you can get a high-rise building or a whole city built in 6 months if you use BIM. And they will believe that, and they will chase someone, and they will make it your problem. I think we should grab that, but we should just be very sure to set out the stakes of exactly what you can do and what you can't do. Everybody who's been on a building project that started out 30 years ago and they started talking about fast track, etc., etc., it's never the government or the large client that gets hurt. It's the people on the job, and it will be BIM that gets blamed if it goes wrong. So yes, I would be very happy to hang the BIM banner on anything, and we use that. We must just be careful that we don't hang ourselves out to dry with one of those coming up.
Thank you, Lee. And you know, as Herman said, it is important for us to change the conversation into a business conversation as we move forward. So who should we be talking to as a wrap up? You know, who should we be talking to, and what should we be saying to them, Herman?
Yeah, you know, we've got to build a new narrative, a narrative around the business of BIM, as opposed to the techno the structures and the bits and pieces of it. And then you've got to start working on certainly if you're looking from a government point of view, you've got to get into the Director Generals. You don't worry about the ministers, you're not going to get there. And those are politicians, so you don't want to really necessarily get there. You've got to get into the DG type space, because that's where their names are being made. That's where their careers are being made. And they are super sensitive to all of that, and rightfully so, because that's their profession that they've chosen. And they are not going to pick losers. And they're not going to pick anybody that gives them a half-hearted story, or a story that is broken. So your narrative and the way you pitch it and the nature of the conviction of the whole thing is mission critical. And so that's what we've got to start getting used to, and getting into that narrative and starting to make that narrative the norm. And, you know, whether you're talking to the DG in terms of the government ministries, or you're talking to the FDs or the COOs of companies, that's the kind of target that we've got to prepare ourselves for. Yeah, that's about it.
Fantastic, Herman. So last but not least, just want to thank everybody that gave time tonight in this first BIM Community podcast. Any last words from anybody else? I'll do a round robin as we go through the panel. Anything from you, Nick?
No, I think we've the narrative to the higher echelon based in what you call it in a speak and terminology that they understand or can comprehend is important, and I think follow through and measurements is important. How are we going to get about that? And that I really wouldn't know. I think it's a bit of a challenge, because often you don't get to have those conversations, and often the conversations that they do hear is by those closest to them who are the least informed. And then once something gets approved and goes through, if there's no measurement, then I'm also very, very hesitant and afraid that we might fall into the same trap Lou mentioned, and then BIM itself, or this doesn't work, or the digital thing doesn't work, it gets to blame, not that it was left open-ended and in charge, you know, with one or two departments in this guy, you know, and the normal government red tape with no with no formal process that has been set up by an organization or people that are looking to look after it, protect it, and actually implement it correctly. It's you know, it's a big fear. And a couple of governments that failed in doing this, it took them 4 or 5 years to go back and then consciously change the way they approached it before they implemented it worldwide. And I don't, we do have the positive cases that we've had and other learning curves from other governments around the world that we can leverage. But I don't think that the maturity and the processes in our country at the moment are ready for it as such. So we might have to find other ways of approaching it. But I'd love to see it happen. But yeah,
Fantastic.
I think we're on the
Nick.
right path. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Louis, your side?
Yeah, I think the main issue here is we have been kind of pushed into a certain way of working now. I think people are embracing technology because they had to, working from home, all that kind of thing. I think when we go back to where we were, as Yanni said, it'll be a new normal. Things will have changed because we have found a different normal already, and there will be a mix of that. So I think some things will change. Is to try and find what we can do with that and use the best to do the best for our business and for ourselves and for the people that we work with. And I think BIM is a large part of that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yanni, you?
Just touching on what Hadwan had said, I look forward to the next time where we can have another podcast and perhaps we can discuss, the business of BIM. And on a lighter note, hopefully next time we can have a glass of wine while we do this.
Yes, most definitely. Jacques, your side.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all. It was actually a privilege joining this group. I've actually worked in my previous company, so I think I know, well, not I know a few of you because I've actually met a few of you on the last meeting what we had. So I'm actually grateful to be here, and I think we are the right people because we are passionate for this. And I think one of the last things is what I've found continuously is communication, and I think it's both ways. It's for us, from us to government, or from us to guys who actually need to push this thing forward, BIM and the whole execution plan, and also to your peers as well. It's just spreading that word of how to improve stuff and make it nice for them, and to show them what it can actually do, because this is, and I don't think everybody knows exactly what BIM is. Like we had that, I think Lynn had a discussion that if you ask 100 people what BIM is, all of them will have a different opinion. And I think it's just that at least that we must educate the people. And so it's, again, communication, what I would just say, which is my last thing. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jacques. Isaac?
Yeah, I think, I obviously agree with what he said. I think the one thing that we must just keep on mind that Leon touched on is that the law of the diffusion of innovation says only 16% of the population are actually, the front runners. 84% of the population are laggards. So that's reality. I think all I'm saying is we need to know what we're up against. But this is going to be a heck of a ride, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Great. And Herman.
And thank you very much, everybody. I think this was a fantastic and a great start. And let's knock this ball out of the park.
Fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for giving us your time tonight. And with that, we'll end our very first podcast, and hopefully we'll do another one soon. Thank you for attending, guys.